Strain your eyes too much. Decided to put some of the charts and graphs up there for you, and I did not keep one for myself, so we might just freestyle a little bit, but thank you for braving this weather, this awesome weather out there. What is the heat index, up to like 34? Yeah, something like that. So anyway, join me in Revelation chapter 15. We're probably not going to get through 16, but we're going to give it the old college try. So just to bring you up to speed where we are in this endeavor. And I hope you brought your spoon with you, because we're going to talk about the 7 bowls of God's wrath. So they're not very pretty. And so where we ended last time we met, at the end of Revelation chapter 14, we have the Lamb, the 144,000, the harvest of the earth, where we see people who chose the mark of the beast receiving some sort of retribution. Well, this chapter in 15 is very rich in symbolic literature. Again, it's going to serve as an introduction to the last 7 plagues, known as the bowls of God's wrath. And if, as we were mentioning earlier, there's definitely a lot of symbols in here. But what I'm going to do is get you to think back to when you were little. How many of you have a sibling? So most of you. What was, growing up, I had 3. My sister moved on, she's much older than me. She moved on when I was really little. But there was nothing better than watching your sibling getting in trouble, right? And you just saw it coming from slow motion. It's like, oh, wait till Dad hears about this. Wait till Mom hears about this. And, as long as you're not the one in the hot seat, it's all good. And so, yes, that happens in our Clater house as well. They like to get each other in trouble. It's something about watching your sibling, However, watching this, as this scene unfolds, is kind of similar in a way, because we're seeing people who chose a relationship with the beast, a relationship with the world, and what's going to happen to them. These are the people who, instead of being sealed by God, were marked. They received the mark. They had to have the mark to go. And so, of course, God is coming, and he's saying this is what's going to happen. So in a way, we're seeing our fellow brothers and sisters who did not give their life over to Christ, we're seeing them being disciplined by God the Father. And so, and he does it in a very unique way. So I wanted to read the text with you real quick, and then we'll jump into some things here. I won't keep you very long. I don't want the temperature dropping below 0 and anybody, skating on ice out there. We don't need any of that stuff tonight. So I'll keep it a little brief. But here we go. The 7 angels and the 7 plagues, starting in Revelation 15, verse 1. Then I, John, saw another sign in heaven, great and amazing. 7 angels with 7 plagues, which are the last, for with them the wrath of God is finished. And I saw what appeared to be a sea of glass, mingled with fire, and also those who had conquered the beast and its image and the number of its name, standing beside the sea of glass with harps of God in their hands, and they sang a song. The song of Moses, the servant, the God, the song of the Lamb, saying, "Great and amazing are your deeds, O Lord, the God Almighty. Just and true are your ways, O King of the nations. Who will not fear, O Lord, and glorify your name? For you alone are holy. All nations will worship you, for your righteous acts have been revealed." And after this, I looked at the sanctuary of the tent of witnesses, and heaven was opened, and out of the sanctuary came the 7 angels with the 7 plagues, clothed in pure, bright linen, with golden sashes around their chests. And one of the 4 living creatures came to the 7 angels and the 7 golden bowls full of the wrath of God, who lives forever and ever. And the sanctuary was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power. And no one could enter the sanctuary until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were finished. What an awesome scene that is unfolding here in God's throne room. So obviously, not just in Revelation, but throughout the Bible, you hear about the cup of God's wrath, or the bowl of God's wrath. In this case, it's a vessel of God's wrath. That imagery is not new to us. In fact, one of my favorite scenes is in the Gospel of Luke, and Jesus is praying to the point where sweat drops are turning into blood. And what does he say? God, if you can do anything, take this cup away from me. Please do it. But not my will, but your will be done. Again, the cup of wrath of God's anger, things that have to be rectified and restored. So a lot of the symbols in here are not going to be new to you. So right out the gate in verse 1, we see 7 angels, 7 plagues. Again, this is the prelude to what's about to happen before we close this entire book down. Okay, so the final, the final acts of God's wrath against those who have turned their hearts away from God, who have chosen that they do not want to live within God's parameters. They do not want to live within God's kingdom. They've turned against God, and they've relied on themselves for nourishment and everything else of that nature. They did not think that they needed a God to provide for them because they could do it themselves. And so you see 7 angels, 7 plagues. So these are messengers of God that are tasked with executing God's judgment here on earth. These 7 plagues symbolize the completeness of God's judgment. It's very whole and complete. It's perfect. And nobody can escape the wrath of God. In fact, that's why he had to come here on earth in the form of Jesus, to offer himself as a sacrifice for us, the only thing that can atone us and make us right in the eyes of God. But then you move on and you see the sea of glass in verse 2, but it's not just a regular sea of glass, because I've never seen a sea of glass. I know there's a glass beach, but you have a sea of glass mixed with fire, which is going to give us kind of this idea that they represent God, his ability to transcend all things, his holiness, his calm and clear judgment. But then you get the fire part in there. And the way Revelation uses fire, it's a means to purify. Think James chapter 1, and I know it's one of Jack's favorite letters, when the very first thing he talks about, consider it pure joy when your faith is tested. Okay, so that's a term, again, used, meaning like when you test metal, when you're trying to make a ring or any sort of gold jewelry, you would test it. The fire would make all of the toxins and everything else come out of it, and then you would wipe the top off, and it would purify your precious metal. And so fire has this quality of purifying the presence of God. So what does all this mean when you combine sea of glass and fire together? Again, it's talking about the purity and majesty combined with God's ultimate judgment. God is supreme, he is sovereign, and that has been established in Revelation from beginning to end. All kingdoms on this earth will fail, but God's kingdom will never fail. And then you get mentioned again in verse 2 of those who overcame the beast. You see, these are the faithful believers who resisted the Antichrist, or the first beast we talked about, or second beast, and they remained loyal to God. Here is their hope. All the things that they had to suffer are now going to be fulfilled. Let me pull some things up here as well. So if you're following along on the handout that I gave you, I'm trying to touch base the best that I can here in order. But again, this whole idea of those who overcame the beast, that is the victory, right? The endurance. We look at Christianity sometimes, and I'm saying that might be a little too stereotypical, but when we're in relation with God, I mean, it's a journey, right? It's more of a marathon than a sprint. We endure a lot of things. We've had to endure a lot of things, but we are assured, and that's where the hope is, that once we get to the end of the road and the end of our journey, we'll be with the Lord forever. And that verse is kind of paying service to those who have had to endure so much, who refuse to be marked by the beast, but rather be sealed by the living God. And then the next, we come to the harps of gold, I keep saying gold. I want to make that gold. I don't know, I've got metal and gold work on my head. But the harps of God that we see here in verse 2, again, these musical instruments often symbolize worship and celebration, which we are back to a state of worship in heaven. And that's what I love about this part of Revelation. Because again, you see where the devil wages this new war against the throne of God, and the angels, the 1/3 of them, they follow him onto the earth, and everything's kind of disrupted. But this is God saying, I have the final say. I have the final authority. You might have gotten over, but these things are going to happen. And as they're worshiping, they use this song of Moses, which is, an amazing prayer, just a personal prayer that all of us can say every day. Great and amazing are your deeds, O Lord God the Almighty. Just and true are your ways. O King of the nations, who will not fear, O Lord, and glorify your name, for you alone are holy. All nations will come to worship you, for your righteous acts have been revealed. I love this. All nations, all people. Look at the amazing deeds that you have done for us. And it makes, again, what infuriated, we know that Satan is so furious because he doesn't understand why God would, quote unquote, want to waste his time with us. Because we're sinful, broken people. And of course, Satan could not rectify that. And he was like, why are we even wasting our time? And so when I look at that, it makes me think of a lot of the relationships I have with my fellow man, right? Like, why would anybody want to have a relation, And when you look at it through different lenses, and we see a God who relentlessly pursues us, it changes everything. Because I want all people to know that that's the God we serve, and that's what he does. And so as the harps of God are playing, the song of Moses is being sang. So everything at this point from the song of Moses, you've got to think back to Exodus 15. When the Israelites are leaving, they're fleeing, they're getting out of there, right? And then you have this idea of deliverance and salvation. They're being delivered from their life of slavery and this new life that God has promised them in the green pastures of Canaan. But then we come to this tabernacle of testimony in heaven in verse 5. Again, it symbolizes this heavy presence of God's covenant, power, and holiness. God has always established a covenant with his people. However, we've always found a way to break it. I don't know why we do that, but it's like, again, you can put in all the rules that you want in somebody's life, and they're eventually going to break one of them. There's nothing that we can do because we are imperfect. And we recognize that. And we recognize that it's God's salvation that delivers us from what we truly deserve. So you have this tabernacle, testimony in heaven, that really underscores the divine authority behind why God is about to do what he's about to do. Why is he bringing his wrath upon these people? And then you see angels that are clothed in pure bright linen with golden sashes from Revelation 15:6. So again, pure linen always represents righteousness, holiness. The white and golden sashes, again, indicate that they are members of the priestly service. They provide service. They are priests to the people. Angels, again, are portrayed as holy and authoritative messengers of God's will. But these aren't everyday, ordinary angels. These are angels that are clothed in a certain garment, pure bright linen with golden sashes, which would have represented wealth, authority, power. Only the wealthy were able to afford clothes of different colors, especially that were purple and things of that nature, because they had to get dye for it, and it was a whole process. And so we get down towards the end of this prelude, right? And it's setting up for these next series of judgments. We have golden bowls filled with God's wrath, again, symbolizing this complete measure. We do a lot with measurements. These golden bowls represent the, again, sacredness and finality of God's judgment. And then smoke is the last thing we'll talk about tonight as we start to kind of wind things down. You see, coming from this throne, you see smoke and God's glory and power. Smoke, again, symbolizes God's majestic powers. It's often associated with his glory, but his judgment. And this temple being filled with smoke, again, indicates God's presence and how overwhelming that is. Remember when Moses interacted with God? His face was glowing when he came back. That would have been such an amazing thing to have witnessed. But as we close this chapter, we have to understand that, again, this image appears, or this chapter portrays how righteous and holy God is, and that it's God who ultimately gets the victory. It serves, again, as this prelude to the next judgments that are going to show to us that God will triumph over all things. It's amazing to know that the battle has already been won, that God has won this victory for us. And it really sets up, again, kind of, when you get into chapter 16, it can get a little depressing because it's just one thing after the next. And we'll get into that next week because, like I said, I know with weather and everything tonight, I don't want to hold anybody too long. I was prepared to go through 16, but we'll bookmark it for next time. You live to read another day or talk about Scripture another day. That's what we're going to do here. So next time we gather, and I'm doing this, we'll get straight into 16. I've already got it ready to go. But be safe out there tonight, tomorrow. People that have to drive, going up and down the ridge. I know Joe Mack's still recovering from meatloaf. Their meatloaf's pretty good. I tried the fish today. It was good too. Granny's Briar Patch. So shameless plug for them. They're closed, so don't worry about going. But if you haven't been able to take the Lord's Supper today, you can do that. It's in the office behind me. If there's anything we can do to encourage you this week, anything specific we can pray for, please let us know as we sing the song of encouragement. Let's sing 9.